Anyway, my name's Kevin Donahue. As Elizabeth said, I've been in the horticulture business for about 30 years. I started off working for an arborist. I was running their lawn care business, not cutting lawns, but fertilization and stuff like that. And then I also took over their tree care program as far as treating them for insects and diseases. Since then, I worked for a company called Imperial Nurseries. Some of you may be familiar with them. They're no longer. They were, in 2013, they were sold to Monrovia Growers. They're based in California. I was with them for 23 years, and I did everything from sweep the floors and purchasing, worked my way up to director of marketing. So really, and while I was doing that, I always had some sort of part-time business, whether it be, at one point I continued doing the lawn care type of thing. I had like 100 accounts part-time. Kind of got to be a little bit too much when the kids started coming. It's just kind of like, what do? Do you work or do you take care of your children? Obviously, I stopped that. In the process of doing that, I came up with the idea of starting a tree farm, knowing that it would take a fraction of the time to run that as it did, a lawn care company. So I started growing trees in the ground. We did that for about 8 years. It took about 2.5, 3 years to, okay. It took about 2.5, 3 years to get it to everything was saleable. The problem with running a tree farm where you grow everything in the ground is there's a very limited window in which you can dig trees and offer them for sale. Combined with you never have what somebody wants. So what I sold the most of was Japanese maples. So I said, I'm not a brain surgeon, but if I only grew Japanese maples, I'd probably do fairly well. So I started just growing Japanese maples, and then I switched to growing them in 15 and 30 gallon containers. So they're above ground. I'll show you some pictures a little later. So they're available year round for sale. And it's just, life is much easier this way. So since then, all I've been growing is Japanese maples. I was just telling Elizabeth, I think I have 8 or 9 trees that are not Japanese maples left. I only have about 70 trees available for sale this year, and I have about 350 in production following that. So it's not huge, but it's a nice little hobby. So anyway, why don't we get into talking about Japanese maples? I'll try that. This is in my backyard. No, I'm only kidding. I wish I was in my backyard. Anyway, again, just a little bit, Elizabeth got in touch with me last fall and said, would you like to speak about Japanese maples? I said, well, absolutely. I'd love to. So here we go. First, I wanted to put this up. There's 2 Facebook groups, which I'll show you their address later. This came in my email this morning, and I was dying. If I'll read it in case anybody can't see this. Why haven't we bought these out yet? Blue maples? It's a once-in-a-lifetime Photoshop special. Very rare, imported from China. Rare blue maple seeds, bonsai tree plants, potted, garden Japanese, 10 pieces per lot. All right, great. So, and this is the actual eBay post. So you get 10 seeds. For 45 cents, you can pay, I think, $6 or $7 to ship them. So 10 seeds, and I don't know that much about stratifying seeds, Japanese maples or anything like that, but I do know that you have a very low percentage of take rate, and 10 seeds probably isn't going to do it. So I got a kick out of that, and then I looked a little bit further, and there's kind of a close-up of the plant. And then, geez, isn't that strange? How come this one's red and this one blue? It's the same plant. So it's just kind of a joke I wanted to open up with, saying, beware what you look for on the internet, because you never, and it kind of leads into one of the things that I'll briefly talk about Japanese maples and how they're cultivated. Been in Japan for centuries. I never really knew that much about where they came from, but they're native to Japan, Korea, Mongolia, China, as well as even portions of Russia. it wasn't until 1820 until the first quote-unquote specimen arrived in England, so that's like where it began, you know, spreading out to the rest of the world. I wonder if I can hold this over here. Maybe not. And I say well over 1,000 cultivars are available. It could be 2,000 because backyard gardeners do their own thing. I know that based on the wholesale and retail market, there are well over 1,000 cultivars that have been bred, you know, for sale over the last 150 years. And what I'm really going to kind of talk about, there's a lot of people that call them, you know, they're Japanese maple aficionados. I'm not one of those. I'm a bread and butter. You want to have a really nice Japanese maple in your yard. You want to get one of these more common varieties because they're proven, they've done well. Sure, you can go online and you can get these really funky looking things, but you know, I don't know the hardiness. I don't know, you know, a lot of people just, they have tons, huge collections, but I really don't know of anybody in this area that does that. I think the nursery up in Southwick, I can't think of the name of it, but I think he does a good job of Japanese maples, but there really isn't anybody that's a true, you know, guru, to the best of my knowledge. So, generally speaking, I figure there's, you know, there's two forms. You have the upright tree form, anywhere from 8 feet to 30 feet tall, and then you have more, you know, this is generally speaking, that's like an upright tree form. Everybody's familiar with that, I hope. And then you have a weeping variety. Weeping varieties, generally speaking, when you buy them, they'll get a little bit taller than they are, but for the most part, that's kind of where they are. So they can be anywhere from 3 feet tall to 6 or 8 feet tall, and they usually just continue to grow wide rather than up. They're called weeping varieties, lace leaf, cut leaf. You know, there's a million names for them. Playing transition. Okay. But I said there's countless colors, leaf shapes, textures, sizes. See if we can get this to work. So I only put a handful in there, but I think you kind of get the idea. I mean, there's some that are, you know, as wide as your fingers, and some that are so barely thread that you can hardly see it. They're, you know, in between the nodes. So I just wanted to briefly talk about production a little bit, since I have a pretty good background in that. And, you know, Japanese maples can be grown from seed, but you will never get a true plant. The only way you can get a true plant, true to a cultivar, is asexual production, which I'll go into it for a second. Basically, you can go out and you can go to somebody's yard and collect their seeds. You have to do it in the fall after they dry. Then sometime in around February, you have to stratify them, which I think takes like 90 to 120 days. Soak them in water for 24 hours, put them in the fridge for 3 months, and You might get, 2 or 3 plants out of it, but you have no idea what you're going to get because it will not be true to the tree that it came from. And that's primarily because there's so much, more often than not, especially the weeping varieties, they're grafted. Okay, so they're grafted on a completely different type of tree on the bottom. On the top, you have the tree. So what flows through there is 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 different types of trees. So when the seed comes out, you have no idea what you're going to get. So don't ever buy seeds and try to grow Japanese maples unless you just want to experiment and have some fun because you don't know what you're going to get. The only way to truly get a true cultivar is asexual reproduction. Basically, rooted cuttings, grafting, and tissue culture. I don't know that much about tissue culture, but I'll try to go into it a teeny bit. Rooted cuttings, basically, that's done in the spring. What you want to do is you would take like new growth, like after it first flushes out, if you get a branch about this big, you want to clip that off and then dip it in some rooting hormone and some type of potting mix. It looks like they're using sand here, and that will root out, and then therefore you have a tree. And it's true to the parent because it's that actual a stem off of that tree. All right, that's how the majority of, like I call upright Japanese maples are done, by rooted cuttings. And there's grafting. Anybody familiar with grafting? Probably more so than me. Hope maybe. Basically what it is you take what, you buy understock, essentially, like I said. It could be a straight Atropurpureum, which is just the most generic form of Japanese maple that you can find. And you're going to get understock. It could be 6 inches, it could be a foot. So you have this tree, and it's a really ugly looking tree. And then you'll take and you'll cut a little slit in there like that. All right, then you're going to take a cutting off of the tree that you want to grow it into. Say it's a garnet Japanese maple. So you're going to take a cutting off of that and you cut it into a shape to look like that. Okay? So that's what it looks like. Then you slice it, you slide it into that little cut in the cambium layer there. So basically you're going to try to match up those cambium layers so the nutrients flow up and down into that new branch as well as the existing tree that's over here. Then wrap it with elastic band, put some, tie it up nice and tight, put some wax on it, and basically you're done. Now it's where the care starts coming into play because you're taking care of 2 trees. You have this weed thing growing over here, which right now is going to supply the vast majority of the nutrients to the root system. And then over the course of 6 to 8 months, this other tree is going to start to flourish. And then over time, basically you let this one go and then you cut this one off. You cut it right there. So now you have basically a brand new tree on the rootstock of something else. So the only way to get that true cultivar is by what's grafted on top of that rootstock. Does that make sense? Yeah. And then there's tissue culture. Again, I don't know, I know some of it, I know how it's done. We used to do it, well, we didn't do it, used to do it at the nursery, but there's firms in California that do it. Basically, if you take, let's say you go out to Mongolia someplace and you find this wicked cool tree. And you're like, I really got to get this. So you break the law and you bring it back into the United States. And then, the only real true way to find out if it's viable is to put it into tissue culture where they literally genetically break it up and grow on millions of little baby, puny plants. That is the most scientific way to do it nowadays, but obviously it's still relatively new to the industry. but you wouldn't do that in mass until you knew it was a viable plant. There were plenty of instances at the nursery where we would bring something in, try it, looks pretty good, bring it to market, and only to have it, something happen in the first 5 years where it didn't quite work out from a hardiness standpoint, or it just didn't perform the way it did. So you kind of want to limit it to 3,000 or 4,000 plants at first before you go to this and ramp it up, because it's easy to get stung, but essentially that's kind of what it looks like as they start to get a little bit bigger. You're just basically from one little cell to a full-blown plant. That's how the vast majority, you guys are familiar with endless summer hydrangeas and things like that. Some of these newer plants that they bring to market, as soon as they know it's really good, they can ramp up production and have 500,000 plants in less than a year. It's really incredible what they can do with tissue culture. Just briefly, getting into soil. I say most soils, with the exception of heavy clay soils, and Japanese maples will not tolerate wet locations. So, if your soil looks like that, it's probably not a good idea to try to plant a Jap maple, or not much else for that matter. But generally speaking, they are very, very adaptable trees. There really isn't a lot that you have to do to them. There are some diseases, I'll go into them, but they're really there. So such forgiving plants. I say full sun to partial shade. I grow my trees in, I'd say a third of it is dappled and 2/3 of it is full sun all day long. You'll read about leaf scorch and you can't grow them in the full sun, and I'm like, well, it'll grow right here in my nursery, why won't it grow in your yard? So I kind of, you read all these books and all these online articles, and it's got to have half a day of shade, and I'm like, we grew 50,000 Japanese maples up the street in Granby in full sun every day, every year. So yes, lighter colored varieties, variegated varieties definitely need some shade, or they will just bleach out. Some of the really light colored, limey green ones, they'll almost turn white if they don't get enough shade. So you got to figure, shade wise, if you get half a day's worth of shade on some of those varieties, that's probably okay. When I go to people's houses and say, where do you think this plant would go? And I look around and, well, there really isn't a bad place. Unless it's dense shade and pure clay soil, you're probably going to have some pretty good luck. It may not thrive as it would in a perfect location, but there really aren't too many bad locations. The biggest restriction is size, light, of course, and soil. And I say mulch, yes, because they don't like hot root zones. And I'm going to say this for any plant, because just driving here tonight, I always laugh when I drive down Outerhurst Boulevard and I see the maple trees down behind Little City Pizza there, and they've got these huge cones of mulch. And you look at the trees and they're all dwarfed and stunted, and I just don't understand why they do it. Essentially, you can see what's starting to happen here. You can see how it was mulched up to here. See, all these little feathery roots are roots that are trying to regrow because ones below have died. The next slide, that's what happens. It gets rotted, it stays moist, and you can end up with Phytophthora root rot, or just a canker like that. And what I tell people is, I don't care, you can put 5 inches of mulch down, but start at about 1 inch out from the trunk of the tree and then go up. Never touch the tree with the mulch at the original soil line. It doesn't matter what you're growing, any type of tree. So, just some of the diseases, they're not overly common. Phytophthora root rot. Many of you might be familiar with Phytophthora because it's a very common root disease, whether it's rhododendron or azalea or vegetables. You can see it in here where it's kind of getting all dark, and you can see it's rotting in that area. And then as it continues, you'll start to see some of this black branching. More so at the tips, it would be more like a Pseudomonas. I think Pseudomonas. We'll just find out in a sec. But generally, that's like the start of like a root rot type of thing. Soil's too wet, you're going to run into problems. So verticillium wilt, you'll see this. I just wanted to show you what it looks like if you actually cut into the wood. Generally speaking, if you have a Japanese maple or any type of shrub that gets a wilt type of thing, it'll come up in the spring, and then some of the older growth will kind of start to wilt and then die, maybe half the tree. It's much more evident in evergreens where you're looking at a tree and half of it is just like slowly turning brown. So if you cut into the wood, if it's verticillium, this is what you'll see. You'll see these brown stripes. This is vertical and then horizontal. Absolutely nothing you can do. Now, fortunately, it doesn't necessarily always kill the trees. If with something like verticillium wilt in Japanese maples, if you can cut off the infected branches here and there and give it a little bit of fertilizer, you'd be surprised how well they come back. So it looks really, really, really bad, but it isn't always the case. These trees are very forgiving. A Pseudomonas tip blight. Similar to before, you see it kind of more on the tips. You can see some of these here, but when you see this brownish in here like that, and a lot more often it's out on the tips, that's Pseudomonas tip blight. Again, it's not going to kill the tree. The only thing that'll really, really kill a tree very fast is that Phytophthora root rot. This type of thing, some people also call it like winter kill. You cut it back to where it's, before before you see the symptoms, and generally speaking, a lot of times it will do fine. Those are really the three biggest things from a disease standpoint for Japanese maples. Insects, the only thing I can think of that ever do any damage to a Japanese maple if you had a really bad grub infestation and they did a number on the root system. But generally speaking, they don't have an issue with insects. So, they're really such a forgiving plant to grow. Pruning, excuse me. There's a lot of people that have all sorts of different theories on pruning. People will come to my nursery and say, well, do you ever prune the trees? And I say, well, no, I don't. Well, why don't you? And I said, well, I might prune them to remove some dead, or if there's a sucker coming out from below the graft or something like that. But, if you come over to my nursery and you're like, I really like this tree, it's beautiful, I like how it's full down in here, great, I'm happy for you. Now, the previous year I had pruned that to the way maybe I like it, which is I like to see through the canopy. So it's all I see, the main branching structure. Well, now all of a sudden you don't like that tree. Okay? But since I didn't prune it, I can still prune it and you'll like it. So therefore, I don't, as a rule, prune with the exception of anything, major shaping, dead, things of that nature, because it could very well limit your customer. Oh, thank you very much. Is this beer? Yeah. And then time of year to do it. I've read articles that say you have to do it in the wintertime because, the sap's not running that time of the year, and this, that, and the other thing. I'm like, well, the vast majority of why I prune is to get rid of winter kill, okay? And if I'm pruning winter, how do I know it's winter kill? It has to start to leaf out in the spring, so I don't know if it's dead. So I always prune. I like to prune after the initial first growth, because then I really know if it's winter kill or not. But I don't like to prune later than, say, the end of June. From that point on, I let it do its thing that year, and that's it for pruning. Grafts. So I mentioned before about upright trees, and a lot of them were rooted cuttings. This is an upright that's a grafted, and you can see it's grafted very, very low to the ground. All right. So some people would look at that and say, "Wow, there's something wrong with that tree." No, that's just the graft. So what I showed you in those images before happened that when it's about 3/16 of an inch, and that's what it looks like. And as it continues to grow, it'll look kind of funky like that. This next one is interesting only because, all right, right here is the graft, okay? All up in here, you see these fine-leafed, okay? Then also, what's this? This big green thing here. Do you see this branch here? That is just below the graft. So that's that weedy, nasty-looking thing I told you earlier about that it gets grafted onto. So if you have a grafted plant, occasionally you're going to have suckers that grow out from underneath. And the only thing you can do is, prune them off. It's the nature of the beast. It's the exception and not the rule, fortunately, but it does happen. Actually, once in my yard, unfortunately, it got creamed that October storm a couple years ago, but I let a sucker go, and then I pruned it. So I literally had a beautiful red lace leaf maple with a nice, tall, full-shaped, full green leaf on top of it, and then people were just in awe, and I'm like, it's pretty easy. It's a mistake, but it was really pretty neat. But again, it was an accident that I took advantage of. Fertilizing. I'll give you my 2 cents worth on it. I fertilize in the spring, and I use a 5 to 6 month formulation. I don't want to push growth in September. It won't have a chance to harden off before winter, and there's a good chance it'll die because it hasn't hardened off. So basically, you don't want to use something with a ton of nitrogen. I use like a 22-5-10, whether it's Osmocote or whatever you want, just as long as it's not quick release, because then it's gonna do a lot more damage than good. The other thing is, having said that, these trees grow really fast. And I want them to grow fast because I want to sell them. But I don't want them to grow fast for you because a lot of times they can very easily outgrow the area. Especially with the lace leaf ones. A lot of people will put a lace leaf on the corner of their house. And if you fertilize them, before you know it, it's really outgrown the space. So I don't like people to fertilize their Japanese maples because, unless you buy one that's this tall and you put it in the middle of the front yard and you expect it to be 10 feet tall in 2 years, you're going to have to fertilize to try to get anywhere near that. But generally speaking, they grow fast. There's no real need because they will outgrow an area faster by fertilizing than if you just let it run its course. So that's my take on it. And I do that with almost, any landscape planting. You put it in your foundation planting, and it's good for about 10 years. And then you have to do it again because they get too big. So these are just some of the very I'll call tried and true upright varieties. Atropurpureum is the standard. In other words, that is the native that came from Japan years and years ago. It's just basically it's a red purple leaf Japanese maple. You know, if you see them on eBay and it says, you know, purple leaf or red Japanese maple, it's more than likely that. It's more than likely one of those weed stocks that we buy to graft good plants onto. Bloodgood has been the standard for years. It's the one that holds its color the best in the summertime in the full sun. Emperor One is an improved variety of Bloodgood. Trompenberg has a really, really neat leaf. I'll show you that in a minute. Fireglow is smaller than Bloodgood. Bloodgood 15, 20 feet at maturity. Same thing with Emperor One. Fireglow won't get that big, maybe 12 to 15 feet, and it's more of a little orangey, but much more vibrant red in the fall. And Green Star is just a green-leafed one that I used to grow. And Full Moon is the leaves are really funky, and it looks like, it doesn't look like a Japanese maple almost. So, so this is a Bloodgood Japanese maple. Those are the baskets I was telling you about that I grow in now. So that would be, you know, a typical Bloodgood Japanese maple. I told you I used to grow in the ground. Those are some of the biggest, the last ones that I grew in ground. That was about 14 feet tall. That's Emperor One, just an improved variety of Bloodgood. That's Green Star. And that's Full Moon there. So you can see that, I mean, it does look like a Jap maple leaf, but it doesn't. The wonderful thing about the Full Moon is in the fall, it's either a fire like orange or a fire red. And it's just, I mean, so much brighter than like the red maples or the reddish of the red maples or the yellow of the sugar maples. It's really pretty neat. And then there's just a Bloodgood leaf. And there's the Fireglow leaf. And Trompenberg, that's a baby one. You can't really tell there, but if you look at the foliage here, it's very glossy and almost curved. It's really, and it doesn't get as big as Bloodgood either. Not as readily available. It should be, I love it. I don't know why there's not more available. And we can get onto the some of the more common weeping varieties. Like I said earlier, there's thousands of cultivars. I focus on some of the ones that are more readily commercially available because they're tried and true. Red Select, also known as Anabe Shirare, Tamikiyama. Tamikiyama has a very fine textured leaf, grows fairly quick, and grows more broad than tall. Red Select is more compact. Garnet is similar to Tamikiyama, but the leaves themselves are even more dissected. Crimson Queen, similar to Red Select, kind of halfway in between the Tamikiyamas and the Garnets and the Red Select, but it's much more dense. Orangiola is like, you can't put your hand in there so thick. And it just stays this huge mound. Verdus is green, it's like the standard of the greens, and then Waterfall is a newer green variety. Let's see what we have for photos. All right, so that's Orangiola. I was saying before, it's just like this huge, dense mound. Very fiery orange in the fall. That's Red Select. You can see it's a little broader, still relatively dense. And that's Tamikiyama. That one's a little taller. It was grafted a little higher, and you can see how it's not as dense as the other varieties, but it will grow wider faster. And then the Viridis. And Orangiola has the new growth in the summertime, comes out like that. It's pretty cool. And I haven't talked too much about like low grafts, but depending on where you graft, so that tree there will never get more than maybe 18 inches tall. It's great for like a rock garden or something like that, and you can just kind of cascade. And that's the neat thing about grafts, is you can really control the plant. That's Taomikiyama. You can see how narrow the lobes are and stuff in the foliage, so it doesn't look anywhere near as dense as like the Orangiola or the other one. And then the Viridis is similar. Red Select, that's fall color. This photo doesn't do any justice because it is really like fire engine red. I mentioned some Facebook groups. One is Japanese Maples and Conifers, and the other, can't really tell what it is, but I will have this information available. And these are the type of people that I was talking about earlier, where they show you this picture, oh, I can't wait, I got this thing, and it's a twig. It looks like a weed to me, but they're like infatuated with it. And I'm more like, the people in this room, I want you to be happy with a tree. I don't want you to be spending, a month out of the year tending to this one little tree, because I know you have a lot of other gardening chores you want to do. But just like anything, people get into things. And I just get a kick out of following these two groups because they really have some interesting posts. Let's see what else we have. So that's what my nursery looks like right now. You can, as I said, I grow in these baskets now. Okay, and then this was taken, let's see, that's the first row. So that was planted, I want to say, in the fall of 2014, and this was probably midsummer 2015. So I buy small trees, that's been in the ground for a year or so. It's probably put on about 6 inches worth of growth. And, anywhere from 3 to 6 to 7 to 8 years before it's a quote-unquote sellable plant, depending on, how big I want it to get. For instance, those have probably been in the ground 7 years. I say in the ground, in the pots. But it's great. You want to buy a tree? Take your pick. It's out of the ground. You can have it whenever you want. It's so much easier to deal with. And then, what else? And that's it. So, I hope you have some questions. I'm sure I didn't answer everything. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You plant, right?
Yeah, and Elizabeth asked me last fall, I'm not here to sell trees. I'm here to tell you guys, like, beautiful tree, plant them. They're very, very simple to care for. Very, very limited in disease. When I worked for the arborist, we never treated these things for insects or disease or anything. They just grow. Don't fertilize them unless you really want them to grow super fast.
Lawn fertilizer, how bad is that for a Japanese maple?
No, I wouldn't be concerned about lawn fertilizer. I would be concerned about herbicides that they're putting down on the lawn for dandelions and things like that. Herbicides for crabgrass control, I wouldn't be the slightest bit concerned about, because I would use a very similar product to control the weeds in the nursery. But to control dandelions and things like that, obviously if you spray the foliage, it's going to do a significant amount of damage. But even some of the chemicals, if you spray around the root zone, it will damage it as well. Generally speaking, the products that they have out there nowadays that most of the lawn care companies, I'm assuming, use are safe. Having said that, I would never plant almost any tree without a mulch ring around it. You know, just for lawnmower damage, at the very least. So.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Is it normal for your tree to always have like little dead twigs underneath it? You know,
Japanese maples?
Yes.
Yeah. The lace leaves, absolutely.
Always.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. I planted one in my neighbor's, actually there's a photo within there someplace, and I was just in there the other day before the leaves came out, and it's like, underneath it's like all this old gray, dead stuff, and it's perfectly normal. So if you think about it like an evergreen tree, have you ever seen evergreen in the fall when all the old needles turn yellow and fall off? It's the same process. The old interior wood is dying, all right, because it's not needed anymore, and all the new stuff will, you know, keep the plant healthy. Does that make sense?
Okay, I just wondered because when I mow the lawn, I'm always throwing it, you know, out of the way, but they're pieces like this long, but very, very thin.
Yep. As long as it's underneath, it's fine. If it's out on top, then, you know, it could be.
It's on the ground, I don't know where it's
Oh, yeah. But I mean, more than likely it came from underneath.
Oh, okay.
So if you looked at it, I mean, the leaves are just starting to come out now. If you look at it now, I bet you see a lot of gray stalks underneath there that are just dead.
So that's what's going to come down, okay.
All right. Any other questions? And it doesn't have to be limited to Japanese maples.
Do they need a lot of water?
Generally speaking, the first year, when I tell people, when I plant a tree or they buy a tree, I tell them when you plant it, once a week water it. In the summertime, if it's really hot, you might want to do it twice a week. And then I tell them how to water. Because some people think like an irrigation system for their lawn waters the trees. It doesn't do a darn thing. When I tell people to water lawn, I tell them to put a hose there and just have it trickle out. Okay, just a trickle, and sit it at the base of the tree, leave it there for 3 or 4 or 5 hours. Because what you're doing is you're soaking that entire area down a foot, 2 feet. And that's where now the roots will reach to that area to get the extra water. Otherwise, you're only, you know, watering the top 2 inches of the soil, which is not good for the tree because then all the roots stay up there. Does that make sense?
Yes.
The second year, usually you're fine. I mean, if you have a month straight of 80, 90 degree with no rain, then yeah, you're probably going to want to water it. But for the most part, very forgiving trees. Okay?
Yes.
Any other questions?
Where are you?
I'm in Terriffill. You won't find me. Because I have a partner, it's his land, he has a construction business. I don't know if everybody heard the name Roderick.
Are they on Corey Road?
My trees are out on Quarry Road. I used to spend a fortune on advertising in the Yankee Flyer, only to find out that the vast majority of the people that want to buy these trees aren't looking in the Yankee Flyer that much. So last year I said, yeah, I'm going to put these trees out here on display. So I talked to, Paul, who owns the property, and he said, yeah, go ahead. So I put them out there, and
How do you buy them? Because I went by today and I thought when you started talking about
just call me.
Oh,
Call me, set up an appointment. Like I said, but what I do is I live on Hayes Road,
I know.
and I just have people meet me at my house, and it's on private property on the end of the street. You drive down there, I walk you around, you look at anything and everything. We can talk for half an hour, doesn't matter. And
It's interesting going
Want to
by.
give us your telephone number?
absolutely. No, I have some handouts. I do have this presentation, but I only have, I think, maybe 7 or 8 of the full, but I'm happy to print them and mail them or email or anything like that. So I do have some literature to pass out. So here's 7, a whopping 7, but there's 13 pages and my printer just wasn't fast enough tonight. So help yourself there. I've got some business cards there. This is, I just grabbed these as I was running out the door. This is my current price list. As I said, I'm not here to sell trees. If you want one, you're welcome to it. And this is what I currently have available, and the sizes and grades and that type of stuff. And then I have my List of seconds, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I have 11, so I sold some. I have 11 trees left for my original. I have Weeping Beech, I have one Emerald Sunshine Elm, which is absolutely spectacular, and some Upright Beech, the stuff that I need to get rid of. So, any other questions?
Do you sell to?
I sell to anybody. Yeah, I have some landscapers that come to me every year, and it's just a matter of, they get a little better price only because they need to, That's pretty much it. Yeah, I'm not in this to get rich. It's a hobby. I love it. It's gives me a lot more time to spend with my family. The amount of time that I have to deal with this. I mean, everything's set up on drip irrigation, so I turn the water on and I'll leave it on one row for, half a day. Turn it on. So, right now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 rows. So over the course of 2 days, 2 days the entire farm can get watered. Actually less than that now because I run three at once. So over the course of a day and a half, me driving down there, flicking a switch and driving back home, over the course of a day and a half, once a week, once every 2 weeks. And then the ones down the road, I have those big gator bags. So each one of those holds about 15 gallons of water, and it takes about 6 hours to drain. So do that once a week or so. Because they're out of ground, they need.
What's the gator bag?
I don't have it basically is a big green plastic bag that sits on top of the soil, and you fill it with water, and it slowly leaches out of the bottom.
So you put that in various areas?
I put it on the trees that I have on display down at the street. Just because, with the exception of one, because I can't fit one underneath it. It's a beautiful weeping one that's down there, and so what I have is I have 2.5 gallon jugs, which I've drilled very small pinholes in, and I'll put them on there and I'll let them slowly leak out. So, but great plants, very forgiving. Some people, it's funny, I'll get a call. I just put them out a week and a half ago, and I've sold 5 trees. And some people, what's your price range? Well, anywhere from $200 to $600. I said, it could be this, and it could be 6 feet. Oh, geez, that much? And then, next person I say, wow, those prices are great. And I come over and look at. You don't know what if you want to go to Home Depot, you can go buy a Japanese maple for probably $39 or $49.95, and you get what you pay for. So, plus these, they're grown here. You don't, and that's the other thing I want to mention too is one of the things I was looking into earlier, the vast majority of cultivated Japanese maples now come from the west coast of the United States. Doesn't come from Japan, doesn't come from China. It's all in Oregon, California and Oregon. So.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.